Yo, welcome back. We are here with the final installment of the Preaching Collective under the B.L.E.S.S Rhythms, Missional Practices. And today we're going to be talking about...
Was it missional practices or missional habits?
Missional practices, missional habits,
rhythms,
missional rhythms.
I think it was missional habits.
I mean, conceptually, it's all of them. I think it's missional habits actually on the thing, but you know, it's
habits, rhythms, practices.
Hey man, as long as you're doing them, as long as you're doing them,
as long as you do them.
That's the concept. Just do it.
Sabbath. Let's talk about Sabbath, man. So this is one of the things that I think is interesting because it's kind of those. It's kind of one of those words where people think, oh, like Sabbath, I can't do something on a particular day. You know, I know for some people that's the image and
that's interesting.
Hear in their mind. Mm-hmm. But for you guys, like, what do you think when you hear the word Sabbath or rest or like, how do you, as a blessed rhythm, as a blessed practice, how do you like, what does that mean? What does that look like for you guys?
The first thought, just even when you said that, was maybe it's our tendency to think through, and I don't know if that's the way we've been taught. Maybe that's the problem, is that we've been taught from the negative versus the positive. So even when you just said that, my thought first went to, oh, is Sabbath a thing about what you can't do, or is it something to try to guide you to what you can do?
Or you get to do.
Right. Yeah. But even just the two, like when you were like, oh, most people think about Sabbath as, oh, I can't do something. Mm-hmm. But what if the intention from the beginning was always to say, hey, here's what you can do. Think about it. Like in the garden, I was just about to look up Genesis 2. In the garden, the intention was, hey, you have all of this in front of you. There's just this one thing that you can't do. And our tendency was to go, or at least the attention was, oh, that thing that I can't do, mm-hmm. and focusing there versus all the things I can do. And if Sabbath is maybe the attempt or maybe the intention to turn our eyes back to all the things we can do versus the idea of something that we can't do. It's like, oh, you can't work. Or maybe it's more.
Well, yeah, I think that it can't work. I mean, that's coming from, Judaism and sort of the little sort of following of the ritual. But that was always sort of a tool, I would argue, is more like a necessary disruption towards where we're supposed to be all the time, which is rest in the Lord. Right? Mm-hmm. And so I start with Sabbath. Genesis 2 says, heavens and earth were finished. The seventh day, God finished the work he'd done. He rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. So God then blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it, God rested from all the work that he'd done in creation. And it's interesting, like this is the final day of creation. It doesn't say it was morning and rest, the morning and day, the seventh day. It's a sense of God had created all those things and the creation was finished. And the idea of God resting isn't that he was really tired.
I can't do work. That's what I'm saying.
So God's still working in the sense of he's keeping all creation running. I would say, the sense of God resting is a sense of, okay, here's all that created. Now he's inviting us to enjoy all that he's created, to sit with God in his rest, right? In his peace. Yes. Because the rest of Genesis 2 mentions Adam and Eve, work the garden, etc. And so this sense of they're living in the creation, but in the presence of God, in the rest of God, in his peace and his hope. And in many ways, the literal practice of Sabbath, of where I'm not going to work today, is a way of reclaiming that original creation.
So would you say it's almost like a God setting a pattern for his image bearers in order to...
Yeah, I'm a quick sketch here on how I think about it is, I don't think I would argue work was always meant to be sort of the sense of release and enjoyment and freedom. The reason it's not is because of our sin, right? Thorns and thistles, right, in the ground. Mm-hmm. It's hard to labor, etc. And so then the actual practice of Sabbath, which is literally to stop work, is more a sense of like to stop work in this sort of sin corrupted world, which is work now is stressful and
to stop
sweaty.
A kind of work.
It's a certain kind of work, right? And a kind of work that we can't escape from, right? The sense of that we do work and it tires us and we have to deal with all these issues. It's hard to achieve. It's hard to produce. It's hard to create. It's hard, all these different things. We can be selfish when we work, all these different aspects. And I would argue that the literal sense of like, okay, I'm going to take a time away to step away from that. It's so that then we can then reorient ourselves to the Lord so that we can step in again, really from that perspective, like all work is to be done as worship to the Lord. as a sense of freedom and release. It's which I think we'll eventually get back to. And so we can sort of focus on the very little sort of aspects of, okay, I'm going to take this weekend off, right? But then it's not to take the weekend off to like then veg out and flip on my phone.
Right.
I would argue it's sort of reclaiming what God has always wanted us to have in relationship with Him, which is a sense of peace and worship and enjoyment and delight and pleasure and all these things that sin gets in the way of. And God has sort of, I think, provided a way for us to sort of to reconnect it to those things. That's why we say Jesus is Lord of the Sabbath.
Yeah.
Is like Jesus is Lord over this day in a way that sort of is allowed to be like a roadmap for how we're to live all of life.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, he's like, that's it. Okay,
Mic drop, done.
yeah, I know. Yeah, I like Sabbath. There's a couple of things in Scripture which kind of helped like seal my faith, if you will. One of was like the Passover when they put the blood on. Like I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Oh, okay, you got the blood. Okay, but the Sabbath was also another one. What you said, Ramon. I'm thinking about entering into His rest when we stop, striving from our works of sins. And it's funny when you read that and the passage, he says it like 3 times, I think, in this passage. God finished His work that He had done, that He had done, that He had done, that He had done. And so then when you fast forward and you see in John 5, I think it's John 5, he talks about like, hey, like me and the Father are working when they had this issue with the Sabbath. And I always wondered that, like, what do you mean? Like you're still working? Like he said, you're still working. But then he goes into, it goes further in, I believe it's Hebrews, when it talks about like we enter into His rest. Like we stop striving from our work, not just, like in a spiritual sense. We stop striving for our work, or not work. We stop working and we enter into God's rest. And so this is one of those like those things that help me to understand that it's not just from the spiritual side, but then also like, reorient yourself. How are you living outside of God's care? Are you living outside and doing the things on your own? How do you then reorient yourself and kind of get rooted in what God is saying? And it's like you enter into His rest.
Yeah, that's good. As you say that, the entering into God's rest, I think about John 15, Jesus being the true vine, disciples being the branches. So this idea of abiding in Christ.
Yes.
The word abide is actually synonymous with rest. So this idea of like resting, abiding, it kind of go hand in hand. Since the B.L.E.S.S rhythms are missional practices, these are things that people should do.
Yeah.
They're actionable. How do you guys practice Sabbath, rest? What does that actually look like in your guys' life?
Well, I think we sort of, this might sound like a roundabout way to do it, but I kind of just add a value. I think an important framing of this for me is, Sabbath is an invitation to be human again, right? That we are in a culture, and I think especially as pastors, I know I'll speak for myself as a pastor, I really feel this, you might feel this as a minister, that we have pressures on us to be everything, right? Yeah. To be everywhere, to be on top of everything. I know as a lead pastor, I feel pressure to like, okay, I got to know something about building codes, for when we do building campaigns. I got to know something about media. Could we do media? Could we do something about financial stuff and marketing, financial budgets, and because we have budgets and things like that. I mean, there's a lot of pressure in this world to be everything, right? But we're not. We can't be everything. We can't be in control, right? There's pressure to be popular, right? And so this is a quote from Tish Warren Harrison. We're in a workaholic, image-barraged, over-caffeinated, entertainment-addicted, and supercharged culture. Submission to our creatureliness is a necessary and often overlooked part of discipleship. So, like, it's an invitation to like remember I'm human. I don't have to be everywhere at once. That's good. Only God has to be there. I don't have to be powerful over everything. I have to know everything. And so to that end, Sabbath is an opportunity to then say, you know what? I don't have to like run out everywhere today, right? I can be present in this space and linger, right? And so I like going out to eat, right, with my friends and my family, right, and taking time there. Sleeping is a good thing, right?
Amen.
Because
Hey,
Even just the act of sleeping, if you think about it, is just you have to admit, like, I'm not in control right now,
Yep.
right?
it's recharging too. Like it's like
So
sleep is, man. I love sleep,
I think
especially with kids too, right? I mean, come on, man.
Bro.
Listen,
listen,
I was, hey, when it's time to, like, when I was little, I used to like not want to go to sleep because you want to run around, you want to do all this stuff like that. Nowadays, as an adulting, as they say, man, sleep
You
is.
on it.
I'm trying to. Hey, listen,
Yeah,
I'm with the sleep.
that's great currency.
What about
right
what
there.
about?
Let me read this. This is Eugene
Okay, go
Peterson.
ahead.
I love
Yeah.
this. He says, "Grace is primary. We wake into a world we didn't make, into salvation we didn't earn. Evening, God begins without our help, his creative day. Morning, God calls us to enjoy and share and develop the work he initiated."
Yes.
I love that as a way of thinking about sleep. It's like we sleep, we wake up, we didn't have nothing to do with the world that is before us, and God invites us into it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think.
Way reorienting.
Yeah. What about like when you think about rest and Sabbath? What about like exercise and stuff like that? Because I also think about, you talked about the idea of being pleasurable and enjoyable and stuff like that. Like exercise, hiking for some people, playing basketball for some people. Like, is that also a form of Sabbath and rest?
Yeah, I think anything, I mean, it's a disruption, right, of what you've been doing before. And so I think if those help reorient you to the Lord, and I think it helps you, I mean, certain aspects of being healthy, right, is important.
Right.
We're going to say, Crystal?
No, I was just gonna, I was gonna say, I think it depends on the person, like knowing yourself, because if that's something that is not, that causes you to rest, if you're anxious about doing it, then you're obviously not resting. You're entering into it already with the anxious mind. So it just,
Yeah, I mean, for some people, it might be, I mean, James works out pretty regularly. Like Sabbath might be like, hey, I'm going to take time away from my, what do you call it, EDM? What is that? The thing you put?
Not happening.
I mean, you know what I'm getting. Like, I mean, when I was a runner, when I was training, we had regular days, like because of how we trained during the week, there's times in which they didn't want us to train at the same way. Like it was at the same intensity. So,
Oh yes, in that case, yes,
exactly. So it's more of and those workouts were
Relax your muscles. And,
yeah, I mean, you're still working out, but in some ways, it was more like there's some workouts were just brutal. Like you're almost throwing up at the end, right? But we weren't supposed to do that
At that
every
level,
yeah,
it's like that.
exactly. We weren't supposed to do that every day. Like we were intentional days to like say, hey, just go out and run a couple of laps. Sometimes we even did cross training, like, hey, you guys, we'll play some basketball, that kind of thing, as a kind of day to recoup, right? So I think maybe think larger in that sense. I think that could be part of it. Like Crystal said, it depends on the person.
Yeah, it does. Because like for me, sitting with someone who we just dive in deep and we're like sharing the things that are going, that's rest for me. Like I get really rested and
Get re-energized.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I wonder if there's something into the rhythm that is intended to help you recover, especially since work right now is so laborious, which is different than what it was intended to do before, right? Yep. Work before our sort of before fracturing our relationship with God was something different than work after.
Yeah.
And now work after, I mean, what the Sabbath was supposed to be before the fall, I mean, do we really know? Like what Sabbath would have felt like then?
I think we got a sense of it.
Yeah.
I think we have a sense of it, and especially a sense of it given what work has become, right? So it certainly wasn't supposed to be thorns and thistles, right? And like effort to pull from the ground.
Yeah.
Way, right.
And
but I mean, like,
almost
what
like a reluctance, like, you know how people be like, oh man, I got to go to work today.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering,
even
like
the things associated with work, right? And so like
Sure.
work now becomes like, I am how I work, right?
Yeah.
I can't stop.
Yep.
Got to keep going. All those things, I think lies, right? Identity is wrapped up in that, or a sense of like, we're only valuable to the degree in which we achieve and produce. All those different things are now part of the mix that we have to kind of disentangle ourselves from.
For sure. But the whole thing was just to say, like, the Sabbath now being a rhythm in the sense where 6 days, it becomes a place for recovery, right? And in the same sense as a workout, like you work out to a certain degree and you've got to have, and there's different. Some days you just need to take off. Other days you're still moving. It's what they call active recovery. There's still a degree of intensity. It's just really, really low, right? Or if you build a workout, like you might have a certain cycle, but every 4 weeks or so, they have what's called a deload, right? So you're sort of if you're looking at a chart, that chart will be up and to the right for a certain season and the intensity is growing, but then you deload to sort of like plateau and kind of come down, and then you peak up. And then even in athletics, that's typically what they're going to do, and hoping that you peak at the right time so that when the most intensity required from you is called, you can do that. And hopefully the training up to that point has satisfied that. But even in between then, you still have points that you need to recover. And so in a similar sense, if you think 6 days being the days that we work and toil, and because of the nature of work now, still having a moment in there that's built in to recover. The only reason why I talk about the Sabbath before the fall is just saying, would we have needed a time of recovery, right? Because it wasn't saying that God was recovering. No. You see what I'm saying? But now that work has changed, it's like, well, Sabbath is intended to enter the kind of rest that God was in when he first blessed it, but we know it's different now. So one, we get a point of recovery, which is great, because then we can get recharged for the next 6 days that are coming. Mm-hmm. But then at the same time, you listen to the author of the Hebrews, and he's saying, well, strive to enter God's rest. It's a different thing, right? And so I'm thinking about Sabbath in those ways. Because again, like sometimes for me, it's like, oh, I'm intentionally not keeping my phone near me, at certain points of the day or certain days where it's just like, hey, it's Saturday. I don't really need my phone on me. I mean, my mind is such that I always want to be working on something.
Is that why I can get a hold of you on Saturday?
Sometimes. It is often just not on my person. But I'll purposefully not like have it on me or near me because, again, I'm always wanting to work on something, learn something, try something else out. And so I could be on my phone all the time, not because I'm vegging out, it's because I'm looking for something. Like I'm always looking to see what I could find or what I could learn. But, at times it's just like, hey, let me just put this down just to provide some space, be more present, unplug a little bit.
What does EDM mean, by the way?
Everyday move.
Everyday move?
Move. Yeah. So like move every day.
Yeah.
Move. M-O-V-E?
M-O-V-E.
Okay. Is that something you came up with or is that like a thing?
No, so
because it's on his Instagram, so I've been following his little workout videos.
Speaking of Sabbath, I'm actually not on
day.
social media right now. So
say what?
I said, speaking of rest and Sabbath, I'm not actually on social media right now. So
here we go.
I didn't see the EDM.
So the idea is every spring, right before I work at a software company full time, before our staff retreat in June, like at the end of June. 100 days before then, we do this challenge. It's obviously one of the, most companies are trying to do things to provide incentives for their team to stay healthy. Obviously, it's important. And so he came up with this. And so I think he had done it. I can't remember why he had done it initially, but he invited the team to do it. We've done it for, I think, a couple years now. And every time I do, I'm always looking for some reason to like post content. Obviously, I'm in media and stuff like that. And so, yeah, for 100 days, like, can you move every day for a certain time period, keep track of it? So my accountability was to actually post a workout every day for 100 days.
Oh, so that's good enough. So if you miss a day, I can call you
Hit
out.
me. I've missed one. So
they're very well composed too, I have to say. A couple times I'm like, how did you get that? And he's like, oh, I was using a tripod. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's the thing.
It's the thing.
But even for that, I've got to, I'm on for 100 days. So it's like, well, I can't work out at the same intensity every single day.
Right.
I've got to find rhythms of recovery and rest.
That makes sense.
And so again, I sort of like analogize it that way.
That makes sense. So enjoyment regarding Sabbath, delighting in things. So I'm just trying to give some practical ideas for some people, for our audience that's listening. So Ramon, you mentioned having good food.
Well, no, I let me back up and say I frame it in like two different categories. So I have when I've spoken about this, it's sort of I think of values and then the practices, like actual some examples of things. So the values or everything, right? So the values would be rest would be one, right? So you disrupt what you've been doing, right, in some important way. The drudgery, the monotony, distress, whatever it is, you start some type of disruption to rest. I think it should some habit, a value of delight, right? Some sense of enjoyment. And then I did put down contemplation as the other sort of third value, which is that I do think it's important to reflect, to not just assume you'll reorient. Because I know sometimes, yeah, if I spend the whole day watching movies and stuff like that, or like surfing, like I don't feel quite the same. And I realize I'm not really contemplating. I haven't.
You surf?
Yeah.
You surf?
Surf the internet. I mean.
Surf on
okay.
the web.
Yeah.
Hey.
So rest, delight, contemplate, and then there's some, I think, practice that help us do mixtures of those. So one of them would be, I said fellowship, but like under fellowship would be like eating good food, hang out with people,
Exercising
would
those
be
people
another
that
one.
may.
Sleeping would be another one. I think worship is one. We should say that. That's
about traveling?
Sunday morning.
Can traveling
Sunday
be one?
morning worship, corporate worship together is really significant and important in a way in which I think the Lord reorients us and connects us to one other people.
Traveling? Can traveling be one?
I know it is for you. Where are you going? Where are you going this week, John?
Nowhere this week.
Okay, next week though.
I'm just trying to provide some ways for people to be like, so if they want to like actually like do these things, here's a menu of options that you can do. Obviously,
Creating is another one, I think.
Creating, I think that's actually a big one.
It's a great one.
It's a really big one. I mean, that can be, for those people that like to create, like paint, right? People like to create music. I mean,
see, that's a different.
There's so much. Yeah, there's that.
That's an interesting one to me because like.
Learning,
We've got to wrap up, so I won't take this long. But God did create for 6 days and then rested. This is before the fall.
Yep.
So he created what would be our painting. We are God's workmanship, poema. He's like creating art.
Yeah.
And in that sense, I'm like, he did that, finished that within that time period, 6 days, rested, and then blessed that day because that's the day he rested. Now that we talk about Sabbath after the fall, again, in terms of recovery, it makes sense. Create, sing, travel, exercise, do the things that bring you energy. But I'm interested, and maybe this is a to be continued, in the kind of rest. In the kind of rest where maybe creating isn't. You see what I'm saying?
No,
do you see what I'm getting at? Like,
I think it is because God gave us the raw tools of everything, right? He rested in the sense of like, here's all of it. And then he invites us to step into it. And what is Adam called to do? He tends the garden. Gardens don't happen naturally. Like he has to take the tools of it. He actually says you got to work this garden. So he's invited, and it's still in the rest of the Lord, right? It's still in the sense of God has rested, and now he's in his interaction with Adam and Eve, and are invited to fill the earth and subdue it, and all these different aspects of it. It's sort of I think we're encouraged to take these raw materials of the world and to do good things out of it, right?
I agree with you. I think that takes Sabbath and extends it beyond what some might go like, well, on the day that God put Adam in the garden, was that a different day than the day he blessed and called Sabbath?
Well,
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm talking about sort of literally speaking, right?
Yeah.
Literally, it's not. But like, I think the way the Hebrew, I think the Hebrew writer is wanting.
Literally, you would say like Sabbath. We're in an era of Sabbath, and now we can enter into that.
It fits where we're going, right? We're invited to enter into the Sabbath rest of the Lord. What does that mean? Like, there's gonna be days in the new heavens and new earth, right? But they're forever days, right? But those forever days have the characteristics of rest. And in that rest and new heavens and new earth, there's going to be a city. There's all these things. I think we're still going to create and do things, but without the drudgery, without the stress, without the worry, without the consumption driving it, all these different things. It's going to feel different. It's going to be different because all those things are removed, and almost everything we do will have a sense of delight and freedom to it.
Yeah, and that will feel like rest.
Well, as we wrap up, I just want to say all these things are part of Sabbath, but also prayer, solitude, meditation, contemplation, reflection, writing your spiritual journal or typing, whatever you like to do. That is all part of this thing. And I'm gonna also add, go out and travel.
We said travel.
Go out. I just want to say it again. You got to over communicate, James. Go out there and go see the world, man. Go to Africa. Go to Europe. Go see what God is doing in other places.
You're talking out your privilege now.
You know what I'm
Wow.
saying?
Wow. Write that down. Write it down.
Yes.
If you can.
If you can. Thank you, Crystal. I appreciate that. You know what I mean?
Some people can do other things.
Some people,
even if
or if you got the means, go pay for somebody else to do it. How about that?
Come on now.
You know what I mean? But nah, go
Hey,
ahead.
y'all call John at
Just email me. Just email me. We can make it happen.
you can at John. What's your Instagram? Tell him just hit his DMs and then we'll see
I
about
think my
that.
Instagram is at Pastor JT3. This is a great time to hit me up because I'm actually not on social media right now. So you can hit me up all you want. I'm on Sabbath from that. All right. As we always say, like, share, subscribe. If you like to laugh, you should like, share, and subscribe to the Preaching Collective.
Yeah, the red button's right there. So
Red
like,
button.
if that button says red, if it's red and it says subscribe, that means you haven't subscribed yet. Just hit that.
Right.
And then if you want to know when other episodes are coming on, just hit that bell that's right above it. So
Right. And as we always say, like, love God, love people. We're out. Peace.